Yes, Fintracker should be across the country, and it almost is. We're over 120,000 realtors under contract as of today, which is incredible. We started this 5.5 years ago. Nobody cared about Fintrack, right? It was a pain point for myself in my office. And I was a high producer here, top producer with a Remax brokerage in Winnipeg. I was doing new condo sales, pre-sales, residential resales, etc. A lot of paperwork involved, and I wanted to streamline the process for myself. That was how this started. Since then, we've joined partners with a tech company and gone coast to coast. I'm still CEO and founder. I listen to agents. So after today, if you have feedback, please don't hesitate to send it to us. We really do implement realtors' feedback here. And please don't download the app during this demo. Once we're done, we'll take some questions and then you're free to go and download the app. We don't want you to miss any information. So let's get started. What I used to do as an agent is simply photocopy or take a picture of my clients' IDs. And then I knew I had an imaginary check mark in my head that Fintrack was done. And then I would wait for my office to chase me for those Fintrack forms. It defeats the whole purpose of Fintrack. You need to assess risk and at least know what your client's employment is and what their intentions are in the real estate transaction. And you need to forward that to your office with the offer, not before closing. And what we've done is given you a tool, like Aaron said, to do the job effectively and efficiently. And it's Simon proof, so you can't make any mistakes. I'm going to share my screen and just get started. So what you'll do after this demo is head to the App Store and look for Fintracker. It's Fintracker Compliance for Real Estate Purposes there. You'll find it right there. And register an account. So we haven't pre-registered you. You will select your board, which will waive your subscription, select your company. And thank you, Aaron, for being an advocate over the past few months, helping get this to where it goes. And when you receive a welcome email, you'll set up your password. Once you have that, you'll receive a tutorial video, and you can watch that as well as a refresher. We do have videos within the app. When you go to sign into Fintracker for the first time, it will ask you if you want to have face recognition as a sign-in or thumbprint or 4-digit PIN. For example, if I sign out here now, it's going to ask me to use Face ID. Boom. I'm in the app. 2 folders, pending and submitted. This is very, very simple. The pending folder will have your scan and saved forms, which means it replaces taking a photo of your client's IDs, which is in violation of the Privacy Act. You don't want to hold those in your photo library anymore. So after today, if you're like me and taking photos of your client's IDs, go in your photo library and delete those. You're sharing your photo library with all these platforms these days. And who knows where it ends up. And it does make your client feel uncomfortable. We know it. We've just become numb to it. Instead of that, what you can do is press the only button on the screen, the plus icon, and you're going to see 4 forms at the top. Please disregard the bottom ones. That's for British Columbia. And we're going to be looking at bringing other forms into Ontario and other provinces, like service agreements, working with the realtor, etc. The top 4 are the Fintrack ones. New remote ID is when your client is not physically present or out of country, out of the city, or maybe you simply just forgot to ID them. You don't want to ask them to text you a copy of the ID. I know we've all done it before, but they don't like that. Let me show you. When your client is in person, select New Individual Identification Form. What you see here is a user-friendly version of the CREA form. So the Canadian Real Estate Association has been kind enough to license us these forms. And to start the transaction, you're going to hit the scan button. Gives you some quick instructions. You're scanning the back of the driver's license or ID card. I believe that's a BC one. Maybe it is Ontario. And then the bottom one is a passport. You're scanning the photo page on the passport. We do Nexus cards and other government issued IDs, and we do international documents. So don't sweat. If your client has an expired ID and you fail to see that, we'll notify you, because you cannot use an expired ID according to Fintrack. And so we have blocked that for you. You ask for a current document. If you get a message that says identification is unacceptable, that might be damaged or not necessarily fraudulent, but it could be. So you just ask them for another document, and most people should have another one, maybe a passport, etc. You can scan the passport's encrypted data. It'll pull it all into the app. But what I'm going to use is a license, because the license has a lot of information on it. We're scanning a current ID. You're just holding it over that window. If it's not scanning, try rotating the ID horizontally. Some new cameras or new phones require you to rotate it in our little window there. All the info is entered onto the Fintrack form without error and without effort either. All we ask is that you enter occupation, employer, so ABC Plum, and this is a know your client process. So before you start saying, Simon, why do we have to collect employer and industry? Don't treat this as a screening process. First of all, Fintrack auditors are starting to warn agents and brokerages to elaborate on the occupation field. So that's why we switched it to 3 fields. It'll populate to the 1 occupation field. But more importantly, it gives you an opportunity to save where they work. And so the next time you work with your client, you can pull up their profile and then start the conversation with, hey, how's things going at ABC Plumbing? Now that you've entered the occupation, press OK. You have 2 options. You can save this for later. For you agents that are like me, still like to use shortcuts. So you scan the ID, enter the occupation, save it for later. It'll be here for you on your pending folder when you write the offer or listing. But what we hope you do is get accustomed to completing it. So agent name and brokerage is there by default. You select if it's a buyer or seller. This tells your office there's an offer or listing coming if you send this prior to. I'm sure your office's workflow is submitted all at once. If your client wants to know why this is required by law or why this is your legal obligation, you can send them a disclosure statement. If you don't do a good enough job explaining it, we've got a template there for you and a link to the Fintrack website. For transaction property address, real simple. Start entering that address and we'll auto-populate, avoiding abbreviated city, province, and missing postal code. Set that, move on. What's left? If you're familiar with this form, and you should be by now, there usually is a credit file section, dual ID, and unrepresented individual section. But if you're using the government issued photo ID method, you don't need to bother with all the other ones. So we remove it all from the screen and we simplify the app for you. Run AML check is a feature that's coming out for TREB and all other board members that will allow you, if you don't know the individual, never work with them, and you want to run an AML check after, you can press run AML. It'll run it. If you don't know what AML is, it's anti-money laundering. It runs it against politically exposed list, watch list, sanction list, and known money launderers and terrorist financiers. There's lists available by the government. We're supposed to be checking those anyway. What we've done is automated it all. So you select that, although this will come at a fee. So don't use it on your uncle or your friend, obviously. There will be a 99-cent charge for that. And there is an option for the brokerage or the admin side to run that search should they see a risk or want to run it on all transactions. For the agents, select third party, yes or no. The answer is no. Business relationship, Canadian citizen, in this case, resident, physically present. Moving on, business relationship. In this case, it's a residential property. Maybe my client's an investor. I want to add a little note here, repeat investor. This is not a mandatory field, but we always recommend that you add more information as possible. And the additional measures taken, the most commonly used ones are either to run a search on the internet or run it through some lists like the AML check, or you ask the client to provide a current document, make sure the information is up to date. Of course, we do that with Fintracker. It's automatic. You can't use an expired ID on the first transaction. Moving on, politically exposed. If the answer is yes, and if you don't know what politically exposed is, it's somebody in a significant political role or at arm's length with somebody in a political role, like a mayor or even a councillor of a big town. Moving on, head of international organization, or now even head of sports franchise is considered to be exposed. You ask the individual, when did you ask the individual? Today. And if the answer was none of the above, you'll see that we collapsed those fields. And don't worry about making any mistakes until you get familiar with this digital version of your individual ID form. We will send you to the error on the form by selecting the red submit tab and ask you to complete it. So you'll never submit an incompleted form. And this usually takes less than a minute to run through this, especially if you're familiar with the app. If you want, at this stage, you could submit it to your compliance officer or recipient of choice, upload to your document management system. I can't recall what the format we're using here with your office, or you can add a new transaction. So you can add a new individual, a spouse, a partner on the offer, and we'll just auto-populate your name, your brokerage, transaction property address, and you'll scan the second individual and then complete third-party business relationship, etc. Same with the corporate ID. If you select corporate ID, we'll auto-populate to the best of our ability, but you'll have to fill that form from the articles of corporation that you collect or the file summary. I'll just go into corporate ID and show you that new section at the bottom. And don't worry, when you make selections in Fintracker, we'll show you what the next step is. So you can't make mistakes. The new section at the bottom of the form is, of course, if you select corporate, they want to know the beneficial ownership. We're working with the government to bring in a registry that will allow you to just run a search and see who owns 25% or more. But for now, you should be asking the client, and if they do have supporting documents, great. Otherwise, name them here. It is recommended that we get a written attestation. We are working on sending one from the app where they can digitally sign and send back to us. Right now, ask them, does anybody own 25% or more of your company? And name those individuals here. I'm going to go back to this form. And what I'm going to do is add a receipt of funds. So maybe I'm representing a buyer and I receive a check or bank draft and I have to deliver that to the listing brokerage, or maybe it's my brokerage. I'm double ending, as we call it in Manitoba. I'm going to add that receipt of funds. We pre-populate your name, your brokerage, transaction property address, give you a calendar, select the date. Very, very soon, you'll be able to scan the check and help you out with this form as well. We're about to launch another update when we launch TREB fully. You're one of the first offices receiving a demonstration for this. We haven't even set up webinars. So hats off to Aaron for being on top of this. Check. In the event, folks, pay attention here. When you select a bank draft, many agents aren't aware that the bank draft does not have the Origins account. What does that mean? Origins account is where the funds are actually drawn from. So the bank draft is used sometimes to use third-party funding without identifying that third party. So it's very important. Fintrack knows this, and now they're starting to press for Origins account info. So what we've done to help you with that, if it's a bank draft, so it's not all the time, that you use bank drafts, but if you do, we'll ask you, did the client provide the information, meaning Origins account? The answer is no. Maybe the client says, no, it's none of your business. That's my privacy. That's their right. You're not here to squeeze that out of them unless it's an office policy I don't know about. Always follow your office policy before Fintracker. Suggestions. Deposit to trust account. Yes, this is a proper way to do a receipt of funds for a bank draft. Account number 1 is where it's going. So I'm just going to put ABC Realty Trust account. I don't need to put their account number. We don't know. We don't need to collect account numbers from everybody. Account number 2 would be the bank draft. I'm going to put that account number on the bank draft, which belongs to ABC Bank, not the client. An ABC Bank, banks at ABC Bank, type of account, checkings. Account number 3 would be the Origins account if your client was willingly providing it. And the way to get that voluntarily is to ask them this question. Did this bank draft come from your bank account or from a third party? Once they understand what you're trying to determine, they're going to cooperate with you. And if they say no, close that account out, enter the information that they didn't provide. Maybe they say, yeah, it's my account, but I don't want to give you the account number. You can put account number Origins, and you can select the date, the time you requested it, and now you've documented that you made this effort and the client declined due to privacy, but you do not suspect terrorist financing in this case, and you want to submit this whole transaction. So if I'm not explaining it, this doesn't take long, but once you've completed the individual ID and the receipt of funds, you can save the record, submit it, and in my case, I have selected individual ID and receipt of funds, and I would enter my assistant's email and send it to her. Or if your office is set up with the admin portal that we offer, it'll be there by default. And I'm not sure we'll find that out in the next few days. Now, that's the in-person ID. If you're using your ID later to test the app, don't submit. Save it for later and then just delete it so that you don't have your IDs sitting here for the rest of the time. Now, if you're working with a client again, which most of us do, so you will list their property today and then find them a new home later on, or vice versa, you don't have to ID them again. So go to new individual ID. There's a search bar here. Very important that you pay attention here because a lot of agents don't know this tool exists, even though we have tutorial videos for it and messages for it. Enter your client's name, recall the form that you submitted, will remove the transaction property address. Just make sure they're still working as a plumber at ABC Plumbing if it's a year later or whatnot. We store these for your office for 5 years. In the event of an audit, we're here to support and help and provide reports. So, and that's stored on Toronto servers with Microsoft Azure encrypted. Now, if you pull that up, you can resubmit it for a new transaction, but you have to complete third-party risk assessment again because you should be asking those questions. So that's the search previous for reuse. Now let's talk about the showstopper, remote ID. If your client is not physically present or you forgot to ID them, you should not, and you cannot, as of March 28, 2022, ask them to send you a copy of their ID for you to fill out your form. You either have to use a mandatory to identify them for you so they can physically see the ID or a dual ID process, or the third option on the Fintrack website is a technology that has the capability to authenticate, verify using barcodes, holograms, and facial recognition, and that's Fintracker. You're going to select remote ID, let your client know, Simon, please have your ID ready. And I'm going to send you a link to my app. I need you to just scan your ID and authenticate yourself. Make sure you tell your clients to take their time so it doesn't create more work for them and you. I would highly recommend that you stick with the text message. If they don't have a phone, they're elderly and maybe don't have a phone, ask them to have one of their family members show up with the phone, and you can send it to their phone as long as the individual that you're selling the property to does the scanning, because it won't allow anybody else to. So we're going to send it. All you do is send a text message. I'm going to go to my text. Here it is, French and English. I'm going to open this up. And you read the terms. If you want to click the Fintrack website link, the client can do that. Otherwise, they'll continue. You're going to enter their occupation. Maybe your client's a lawyer, ABC Law, and it's the Law Society. Oh, fix my spelling. Continue. There's a little video that will pop up and show your client what not to do. So you don't want to be scanning your ID with a pixelated background. We don't want them scanning a photocopy or a picture of their ID. Some people don't know that we're trying to authenticate here, and it will reject. So moving on, they select the country, select the document. I'm going to use my license again. We ask for access to their camera one time only. We don't keep access like other apps. We want to make sure they take a nice clear photo of the front. I'm going to flip that ID around, take a nice clear image of the back. And if they're able to do that with a steady hand, they're going to upload, and our software is now validating this document using a checkpoint of criteria. First of all, we do a liveness check. Most important, is that a real document sitting on the desk, or was that a photocopy? So we take multiple snapshots of that image, and we look to see three-dimensional document. We also check the size of it, where the signature is, holograms, barcodes, etc., other fraud list, secret recipe. And once we've authenticated that, we'll extract the info and fill out the form for you. Now, we need to do a facial recognition scan of the client's, basically a selfie that will allow us to match with the ID. And we want to make sure it's a real person and indeed the individual on the app, on the ID. Let's do that. What we're looking for is heat, movement in the face, make sure it's a real person. So they're not using, the homeowner's picture and the homeowner's picture of their ID. I will assure you, not only will we detect fraud, we can't say that 100% that we'll prevent fraud. Nobody will ever claim that. But what I will guarantee you 100% is we will deter fraud, because if any individual that is trying to break the law and you send them a link to authenticate and verify themselves, they're not going to do it, right? They're going to have a second guess themselves. So you'll receive a notification that this transaction is complete. As you saw, it was approved. I'm going to go here to my app, sign in. All you've done is send a text message. It's not here. Refresh the browser by dragging down on your screen, and there it is. It's ready for you to complete. All you have to do is fill in the missing blanks and submit it to your office. Now, when I said at March 28th, you're no longer allowed to use a soft method to identify and verify clients like FaceTime during COVID, no, it's not allowed. If your client's out of town, you have to prove that you use the technology or a mandatory or dual ID. Use Fintracker, it's the easiest way. This feature should only be used for clients that are non-physically present. Why? In the near future, we have included some free transactions for your brokerage for the next little while. We will be activating a fee for this because it does cost us money to verify and authenticate. It's going to be a nominal fee for TREB members. It's $2.99. $2.99. So you'll buy credits here and you'll be able to use them when your client's non-physically present. The reason is you will have to provide documentation like this, and we attach it to your transaction, which is IP address, timestamp, who the individual scanning was, that we did We did a liveness authentication and age estimation, date of birth, meaning I looked my age. Unfortunately, documented date was not expired, fraud list check, all of the required criteria to approve, validate, and authenticate a document. Liveness authentication is the most important thing and the most costly software available today. There are people out there trying to come into this market we've dominated, and they're not using liveness. So I can basically use a photo of your client's ID and a photo of your client and pass those softwares. Thank God Trev has chosen Fintracker, and here we are. So if you ever need help when you're within the app, you select the three dots on the top right, you hit help. Tutorials are here for each feature that we offer within the app. So you just scroll through and we'll have each feature here broken down to a few minutes. And if that doesn't help you, you can select contact support, send us a message. My team is here to help. I want to say 24/7, but it's 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. And sometimes I do check the support tickets after hours. So I am an agent and I know how important it is to get help immediately. My team responds within minutes. If you don't believe us, test it out, just hopefully not all at the same time. All right, any questions? Oh, the submitted forms. I always forget to do this. Sorry, folks. This is what the finished product looks like. It's nothing you're unfamiliar with. It's the Canadian Real Estate Association individual ID form and risk assessment, politically exposed, all in one. So you don't have to go and look for these forms or lug them around. It's all in one. And that is the finished product. When you're working with the client again, don't go here and pull up one of these forms and call me and or message our team and say, how come I can't use this? Remember, you should go here, individual ID, search previous, recall it and create a new transaction. Even if the ID is expired, you are allowed to use it with Fintracker because you authenticated and validated it when it was current. Okay. Excellent. Any questions? Maybe I can showcase anything I missed. Let's take a look at the chat. Sorry, I missed the beginning. Do we log into Fintracker, create an account? Yeah, so you can actually go on your desktops or your mobile devices. I would recommend going on your mobile device. Go to the app stores, download the app, register an account. You're not using your real estate username and password. Register a new account. The first question is, what company are you with? You'll see Century 21 as a drop down. Select it, then the board, and then create the registration form, and the app will be free. Of course, the remote ID will come at a cost later on, but that is probably not until maybe spring. We're going to run with this.